Ma'am, I need you to step out. This vehicle is stolen.
Car. My registration is right here. May I reach for it?
A car like this doesn't belong to you. Step away.
This must be a mistake. Let me at least show you registration.
I don't care about all that.
I am Federal Judge Camille Banks. This stop is driven by racial bias, and it's all on your body.
Judge Camille Banks had just left the courthouse. Earlier that morning, she'd been seated behind the federal bench, ruling on cases involving illegal searches, unlawful arrests, and abuse of police authority. For more than 2 decades, she had built her career on a single principle: the law only works if those with power are forced to obey it. Her drive home was routine: same suburban road, same quiet neighborhood, the kind of drive she had made hundreds of times after long days upholding the Constitution. Then, red and blue lights filled her rearview mirror. Within moments, a patrol officer was shouting commands, accusing her of driving a stolen vehicle, one he claimed was too nice for her to own. He never checked her registration, he never lowered his voice. What happens when someone who enforces the law becomes its target? And how much does a single act of racial bias really cost? Stay with me, because this verdict shook the courtroom. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. But if you're new here, hit that like and subscribe, because accountability only works when it's recorded. Judge Camille Banks was born in 1976 in Atlanta, Georgia. Her childhood was middle class, stable, defined by her parents' insistence on education and discipline. Her father, Marcus Banks, had been a postal worker for 40 years. He had worked the same route. He had delivered mail to the same neighborhoods. He had understood, through decades of observation, how systems worked, how they protected some people and exposed others. Her mother, Patricia Banks, had been a public school teacher for 38 years. She had taught English and literature. She had taught her children to read carefully, to understand nuance, to recognize when words were being used to justify injustice, to understand that education was not an escape from the system. Education was the only way to hold the system accountable. They had instilled in their children a singular belief: the law was not a suggestion, it was a framework, and frameworks only protected people if everyone operated within them. More importantly, frameworks only protected people if those in power could be forced to obey them. Camille Banks had taken that lesson seriously. She had studied relentlessly. She had graduated from Spelman College in 1998 with honors in political science and a minor in constitutional law. She had been accepted to Harvard Law School on a full scholarship. She had attended law school while working part-time as a research assistant. She had graduated in 2001, ranking in the top 10% of her class. She had chosen a path that her classmates had deemed impractical. Yale and Harvard Law School graduates typically moved into corporate law, where the money was significant and the hours were demanding. They moved into tax law, intellectual property law, securities law. They moved into the spaces where law was a business. Camille Banks had chosen federal prosecution, not because it paid well, it did not. She had chosen it because her mother had raised her to understand that the law was a tool of accountability, and accountability required people willing to use that tool against power. For 19 years, she had worked as a federal prosecutor in the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. She had prosecuted police misconduct cases with meticulous attention to detail. She had built cases methodically, examining evidence carefully, allowing facts to speak. She had won 79% of her cases. In federal prosecution, that was exceptional. In police misconduct, it was revolutionary. She had secured convictions against 23 law enforcement officers for civil rights violations. Officers who had beaten suspects, officers who had falsified evidence, officers who had violated constitutional rights and had believed they were invulnerable. She proved them wrong. She had testified before Congress on the subject of police accountability. She had written law review articles that were cited in courtrooms across the nation. Her name appeared in constitutional law treatises. Her work had changed how federal courts examined police conduct. Her colleagues described her in consistent terms: fair, unshakable, by the book. Not kind, not sympathetic, but fair. She applied the law equally. She enforced it rigorously. She did not accept excuses. She did not allow emotional reasoning to cloud legal judgment. She did not allow bias, whether conscious or unconscious, to affect her prosecutions. She was a weapon of accountability, and she wielded that weapon precisely. When she was nominated to the federal bench at age 47, the nomination came from President Joe Biden. She had been nominated because her record demonstrated that she could apply the law without personal consideration, because her track record showed that she understood constitutional limits on power, because the administration believed that someone who had spent 19 years prosecuting abuse of authority would be someone who would prevent abuse of authority from the bench. She had been confirmed by the Senate with bipartisan support. 183 senators had voted in her favor. 7 had abstained. No one had voted against her. She had taken the oath to uphold the Constitution. She had understood in that moment that the oath was not ceremonial. It was the culmination of everything she had worked toward. On the federal bench for 5 years, she had authored 48 published opinions. 16 of those opinions had reversed convictions based on Fourth Amendment violations. 12 had resulted in criminal charges being filed against law enforcement officers. Her courtroom was known throughout the federal system as a place where the Constitution was not treated as an abstraction. It was enforced. It was protected. It was defended against anyone who attempted to violate it, regardless of their badge. Judge Camille Banks lived alone in a suburb of the city. She had never married. She had never had children. Her life had been devoted to work, to the law, to accountability. She kept an apartment. She kept a car. She kept her life organized and minimal. She did not need much. She had needed a vehicle that was reliable and safe. 3 years ago, she had purchased a 2022 Lexus RX. The vehicle was a mid-range luxury vehicle, not exceptionally expensive, not particularly ostentatious. It had good safety ratings. It had excellent reliability. It was the kind of vehicle that a federal judge earning $190,000 per year could reasonably afford through financing. She had financed it through her bank. She had made monthly payments. The paperwork was current. The insurance was current. The registration was current. The vehicle's maintenance was current. Everything was in order. Everything was documented. Everything was legal. On the afternoon in question, she had left the courthouse at 4:47 p.m. She had ruled on 7 cases that day. She had issued 3 bench warrants for failure to appear. She had sentenced one defendant to 8 years in federal prison for wire fraud. She had denied bail for another defendant accused of violent crime. She had ruled on a motion to suppress evidence that had been illegally obtained. She had done what she had been doing for 5 years. She had enforced the law. The drive home took 42 minutes on routine days. This was a routine day. She was driving on Interstate 64, moving steadily through the late afternoon traffic. Her hands were on the wheel at 10 and 2. Her eyes were on the road. Her attention was divided between driving safely and her own thoughts about the cases she had heard. The law was clear in most of them. The facts were straightforward. Her decisions had been easy. Her mind was already on her evening: dinner, a book, perhaps a glass of wine before bed. She had a new novel by an author she enjoyed. She had not had time to read it. Tonight she would have time. At 5:23 p.m., Officer Bradley Hutchinson, driving a patrol vehicle in the adjacent lane, made a decision based on what he saw in his side mirror. Officer Bradley Hutchinson was 42 years old, 16 years on the police force, 12 of those years in the Highway Patrol Division. He had conducted approximately 2,000 traffic stops. He had issued approximately 1,800 citations. He had made approximately 200 arrests. He had received 2 commendations. He had never been disciplined for misconduct. He had never been investigated for patterns of bias in his stops. He had also never been questioned about the assumptions that guided his decisions, which meant those assumptions had calcified into certainty. At 5:23 p.m., Officer Hutchinson saw a late-model luxury vehicle in the lane beside him. Inside that vehicle was a black woman, alone, driving calmly, maintaining the speed limit. She was dressed professionally, as if she had just come from work. She was driving confidently, as if she owned the vehicle. The calculation happened instantly in his mind. The vehicle did not fit. The driver did not fit. Therefore, the ownership did not fit. He activated his lights. Red and blue filled the rear-view mirror of Judge Camille Banks' vehicle. She immediately moved to the right lane. She activated her turn signal well in advance. She slowed gradually and smoothly, without sudden braking. She moved toward the shoulder of the highway. She pulled over completely, moving beyond the edge of the roadway. She turned off the engine. She placed her hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, where they were clearly visible. Every movement was compliant. Every action was lawful. Every decision she made was designed to de-escalate the situation and communicate cooperation. Officer Hutchinson exited his vehicle. He did not approach slowly or cautiously. He approached with urgency. The Bodycam activated as he reached the window. The timestamp recorded 5:24 p.m. Judge Banks had already rolled down her window before the officer approached. She was looking forward, not at the officer. Her posture was calm. Her breathing was steady. She was not startled. She was not defensive. She was not afraid. She was simply a woman who had been pulled over and was waiting to understand why. She had been pulled over many times in her life. Being black meant routine exposure to police stops. She understood the protocol. She understood how to behave. "License and registration," Officer Hutchinson said. He did not introduce himself. He did not state a reason for the stop. He simply stated the requirement, his voice clipped and authoritative. "Of course, officer," Judge Banks said. She was polite. She was compliant. She was demonstrating that she understood his authority. "May I reach into my glove compartment?" "Go ahead," Officer Hutchinson said. Judge Banks opened her glove compartment slowly. She retrieved the registration. She closed the glove compartment. She opened her purse. She retrieved her license. She closed her purse. She handed both documents through the window to Officer Hutchinson. Her movements were deliberate and slow, designed to communicate that she had nothing to hide. Officer Hutchinson looked at the documents. He looked at the vehicle. He looked at Judge Banks. His face changed. Something shifted in his expression. The calculation was recalibrating. The registration showed the vehicle registered to Camille Renee Banks. The address matched an upscale suburb. The insurance was current. The vehicle was not reported stolen. The registration was not flagged. Everything was in order. But Officer Hutchinson could not reconcile what he was seeing. A black woman? A Lexus? Official documentation? It did not compute in his mind. "Is this your vehicle?" Officer Hutchinson asked. His voice had changed. It was no longer routine. It was accusatory. "Yes," Judge Banks said. "It is registered in my name. I financed it 3 years ago." Officer Hutchinson looked at the registration again. He looked at Judge Banks again. "Step out of the vehicle," Officer Hutchinson said. His voice had risen slightly. "Now." "May I ask why?" Judge Banks asked. Her voice remained calm, professional, the voice of someone used to asking clear questions. "What was the reason for the stop? What traffic violation did I commit?" "Step out of the vehicle. Now. Don't argue with me." Judge Banks unbuckled her seatbelt. She opened the door carefully. She exited slowly, deliberately, without sudden movements. She kept her hands visible the entire time. She did not argue. She complied. She understood that arguing would only escalate the situation and communicate cooperation. Officer Hutchinson exited his vehicle. He did not approach slowly or cautiously. He approached with urgency. The Bodycam activated as he reached the window. The timestamp recorded 5:24 p.m. "How did you come into possession of this vehicle?" Officer Hutchinson asked. His hand had moved to his belt. He was not threatening her, but he was positioning himself in a way that suggested he was prepared for threat. "I purchased it," Judge Banks said. She was still calm. 3 years ago. I have all the documentation. The financing agreement, the title, the insurance." "That's what the registration says," Officer Hutchinson said. "But registrations can be forged. Documents can be falsified. People steal cars. They forge papers." "My documents aren't forged," Judge Banks said. "They're from my bank. They're from the dealership where I purchased the vehicle. They're legitimate. I'm the legal owner." "A car like this," Officer Hutchinson said, "doesn't belong to you." The words hung there in the late afternoon air. The Bodycam captured them. The moment where bias became explicit, the moment where assumption became accusation, the moment where a police officer stated clearly that a black woman should not own a luxury vehicle. Judge Banks was quiet for a moment. She was processing what had been said. She was understanding with absolute clarity that this stop was not about traffic enforcement. This stop was about a police officer's assumption that she did not own what she owned. "What do you mean?" Judge Banks asked. Her voice remained calm, but something had shifted in her tone. It had become legal, precise, educational. "I'm the registered owner. I have the financing agreement. I have the title. I have the insurance card. Everything you need to verify ownership is in your hands or in my vehicle." "I mean," Officer Hutchinson said, "that you're driving a vehicle that's too expensive for you. That means either it's stolen or you stole it. That means I need to investigate whether you're driving stolen property." "My financial status is none of your concern," Judge Banks said. "It is not probable cause for a stop. It is not even reasonable suspicion. A person does not commit a crime by owning an expensive vehicle. I own this vehicle. I have documentation. The registration is in my name. The title is in my name." Officer Hutchinson did not lower his voice. He did not step back. He stepped closer. "People steal cars," he said. "They register them under false names. They drive them for weeks before anyone notices. You fit the profile." "Of what?" Judge Banks asked. She was asking the question not because she did not know the answer. She was asking it to make Officer Hutchinson state it explicitly, to make him say out loud what he was thinking. "Someone driving a stolen vehicle. I'm an American citizen driving a vehicle registered in my name," Judge Banks said. "That's not a profile. That's a lawful activity. Your assumption that my ownership is illegitimate because I am a black woman is racial profiling, and racial profiling is illegal. It violates the Fourth Amendment. It violates the 14th Amendment, and your stop is based entirely on an unlawful assumption." Officer Hutchinson ignored her. He was not listening. He had already made his determination. His determination was based on the color of her skin and the price of her vehicle. The fact that both of those things existed in combination meant that something was wrong, at least in his mind. "I'm going to need you to unlock your vehicle. I'm going to search it." "On what basis?" Judge Banks asked. "You have no probable cause. You have no reasonable suspicion. You have an assumption. The Fourth Amendment requires probable cause or reasonable suspicion before a search can be conducted. An assumption is not sufficient. Your assumption about my ownership is not probable cause." "I'm the officer. I make that determination." "No," Judge Banks said. "The Fourth Amendment makes that determination. The Constitution makes that determination. And the Constitution requires probable cause. You don't have it. You have a suspicion based on race. You have an assumption based on wealth. But you do not have probable cause." Officer Hutchinson's face reddened, not from embarrassment, from anger, from someone who had never been questioned about his authority, being questioned about his authority. He had been doing this job for 16 years. In those 16 years, people had not questioned him. They had complied. They had accepted his authority. They had not told him he was wrong. "You understand," Officer Hutchinson said, "that grand theft auto is a felony. That's jail time. That's a criminal record. That's serious consequences." "I understand," Judge Banks said, "and I also understand that I haven't committed any crime, and I understand that your stop is driven by racial bias and a violation of my constitutional rights, and I understand that your body cam is recording everything you're doing, and I understand that I will be filing charges against you." Officer Hutchinson was not listening. He was moving toward his vehicle. He was calling dispatch. The body cam continued recording. The timestamp showed 5:37 p.m. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. His voice was official now. He was making it official. He was creating a record. "I've stopped a vehicle on I-64, possible stolen vehicle. Driver is female, black, claiming ownership, but documentation appears questionable. Requesting backup and vehicle verification." The radio crackled. Dispatch confirmed that backup was en route. The dispatcher ran the vehicle identification number. The vehicle came back as registered to Camille Banks. No stolen vehicle report, no flag, nothing suspicious except in Officer Hutchinson's mind. Judge Banks stood beside her vehicle. Her hands were visible. Her posture was open. She was not resisting. She was documenting. In her mind, she was already building the case. She was already cataloging the violations. She was already understanding that she would be filing a civil rights complaint. She was already understanding that this moment, recorded on Bodycam, would be evidence. A second patrol vehicle arrived, then a supervisor. 3 officers now stood around Judge Banks, 3 sets of uniforms, 3 sets of authority, and one woman who had spent her entire adult life understanding how power was supposed to work, how power was supposed to be constrained by law, how power was supposed to be limited. "Step away from the vehicle," the supervisor said. His name was Sergeant Marcus Thompson. He was 37 years old, 10 years on the force. He had not been briefed on what Officer Hutchinson had told dispatch. He was simply responding to a report of a possible stolen vehicle. "Hands behind your back." "On what basis?" Judge Banks asked. Her voice was still calm, still controlled. "I have done nothing wrong. I have committed no crime. I am standing on a public highway in possession of a vehicle that is registered in my name. The registration has been verified by dispatch. You have no legal authority to arrest me." "Hands behind your back," Sergeant Thompson repeated. Judge Banks did not move. She stood her ground. She was standing on the shoulder of a highway. Cars were passing. People were witnessing. The body cams were recording. Everything was being documented. Officer Hutchinson moved forward. He grabbed her arm. He turned her around forcibly. He pulled her hands behind her back. He applied handcuffs. The metal closed around her wrists with 2 distinct clicks. The body cam captured the moment. Judge Banks was handcuffed on the side of a highway at 5:38 p.m. Cars were passing. People were witnessing. The body cam was recording every second. "I am Federal Judge Camille Banks," she said. Her voice was still calm, but it carried authority now, federal authority, the authority of someone appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the Senate. "I am a judge on the United States District Court. I was appointed to the federal bench 5 years ago. This stop is driven by racial bias and a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Every moment of this interaction has been recorded on your body cam. I have done nothing wrong. I am the legal owner of this vehicle, and I will be filing federal charges against you for civil rights violations." Officer Hutchinson did not respond. He was walking Judge Banks toward the patrol vehicle. Her hands were cuffed behind her back. She was being placed in the back of a police car on the side of a highway. The body cam continued recording.
The patrol car had been driving for approximately 10 minutes when Sergeant Thompson's radio crackled. His dispatcher was providing him information about the driver who had been arrested, information about who she was, information that changed everything. His face changed. The realization was moving across his features in stages: shock, disbelief, horror. He understood in that moment that a federal judge had been arrested, that a federal judge had been placed in the back of his patrol car, that a federal judge had had her constitutional rights violated on the side of a highway. He pulled over. He exited the vehicle. He opened the rear door where Judge Banks was seated, still in handcuffs. "Your Honor," he said. His voice had changed completely. It was no longer authoritative. It was nervous, respectful, afraid. The handcuffs were removed immediately. Judge Banks's wrists were examined. There were marks, clear, visible marks where the metal had pressed into her skin, bruises where the handcuffs had been applied with force, evidence of the force that had been applied, evidence that would be photographed, evidence that would be documented. "I'm going to need your badge number and the badge numbers of the other 2 officers, and I'm going to need to file a report with Internal Affairs, and I'm going to need the names of all 3 officers, their badge numbers, and their full identifying information." Sergeant Thompson provided the information without hesitation. He was now cooperative. He was now compliant. He was now afraid. "Officer Bradley Hutchinson, badge number 7234. Officer Michael Rodriguez, badge number 7189. Sergeant Marcus Thompson, badge number 6847. All 3 names, all 3 badge numbers, all documented. Judge Banks was released at the scene. No charges were filed. No arrest record was created. She was simply released back to her vehicle and told to drive safely. The officers did not know what else to do. They had been given official sanction to release her. They did not attempt to justify what had occurred. They simply released her. But the damage had been done. The stop had been made. The accusation had been recorded. The arrest had occurred. The handcuffs had been applied. And the Bodycam had captured every second.
Step away from the door!
What
Hands
are
behind
you
your back.
doing? This is my home.
Yeah, sure it is. You people always say that. We need to search it.
You're making a serious mistake. You got a warrant?
I do whatever I want. Step out, lady.
Are you out of your mind? I'm a federal judge. Your career just ended on camera.
The morning air was still cool when Judge Maya Sterling stepped outside her front door. For more than 2 decades, she had shaped federal precedent, sentenced violent offenders, and enforced constitutional limits on law enforcement power. She believed in rules. She believed in order. And she believed that no one, especially those with badges, was above the law. She was dressed casually, preparing for a simple morning walk, when a uniformed officer stepped onto her porch and told her to put her hands behind her back. What followed wasn't confusion. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate show of authority, captured on Bodycam and her own doorbell camera, that would unravel into one of the most expensive civil rights cases the city had ever faced. How does a federal judge prove she belongs in her own home? And what happens when unchecked power targets the wrong person? Stay with me, because this ends with accountability. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and if you're new here, hit that like and subscribe, because stories like this only matter if people actually see them. Judge Maya Sterling was born in 1973 in Baltimore. Her childhood was marked by economic instability and recurring encounters with law enforcement that shaped everything that followed. Her father had been stopped 17 times by police before turning 21. None of those stops resulted in charges. They were stops motivated by presence in particular neighborhoods, by the calculation that a black man moving through certain spaces required explanation and justification. Her mother, Dorothy Sterling, worked in the Baltimore school system as a guidance counselor. She had raised 4 children with a single philosophical mandate: learn the rules, master them, understand them, because the people enforcing the rules would not give you the benefit of the doubt. She had repeated this lesson to her children constantly, not as pessimism, as preparation. Maya Sterling had listened to her mother. She had internalized the lesson. She had studied relentlessly. She had graduated from Howard University with a degree in political science and a minor in constitutional law. She had been accepted to Yale Law School on a full scholarship. She had graduated in 1998, ranking in the top 5% of her class. But unlike her Yale classmates, who had taken positions at major law firms, commanding six-figure salaries and managing corporate portfolios, Maya Sterling had chosen civil rights law deliberately, not tax law, not corporate law, not the lucrative paths that her peers had taken. She had chosen civil rights litigation because she had watched her father be stopped 17 times and had understood, even as a child, that the system required defenders, people who understood the rules, people who could enforce them. For 19 years, she had worked for the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. She had prosecuted police misconduct cases with methodical precision. She had won 86% of her cases. She had testified before Congress about racial bias in law enforcement. She had written the legal brief that changed how federal courts evaluated qualified immunity doctrine, a decision that had affected thousands of cases nationwide. Her name appeared in legal treatises on constitutional law. Her opinions were cited in law school classrooms. Her work had sent 47 law enforcement officers to federal prison for civil rights violations. She was feared by police unions and respected by civil rights organizations. When the opportunity came to be nominated to the federal bench, she was 48 years old. The nomination had come from President Obama. She had been confirmed by the Senate in a voice vote with bipartisan support. She had taken the oath to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. She had understood in that moment that the oath was not ceremonial, it was sacred. On the federal bench for 12 years, she had authored 73 published opinions. 31 of those opinions had reversed convictions based on Fourth Amendment violations. 24 had resulted in criminal charges being filed against law enforcement officers for constitutional abuses. Her courtroom was known throughout the federal system as a place where constitutional rights were not theoretical, they were enforced with precision and without exception. She had never lost sight of her father's 17 stops. She had never forgotten the lesson her mother had taught her. Rules protected people only if they were enforced without bias, and bias was endemic to a system that allowed officers to operate without accountability. Judge Maya Sterling lived in a quiet neighborhood in a historic area of the city. The area had been gentrifying slowly over the past decade. The homes were grand, dating from the early 20th century, built during an era when wealth and architecture had gone hand in hand. Her brownstone was a 4-story structure with a small front porch, detailed molding, and original windows. She had purchased it 5 years earlier and had restored it meticulously. 3 years ago, after a series of package thefts in the neighborhood, she had installed a doorbell camera, not out of paranoia, out of practicality. The camera was motion-activated and recorded continuously. It was monitored through a smartphone app. It had captured countless deliveries, neighbors passing by, the ordinary movement of residential life. At 7:14 a.m. on a Wednesday morning in June, Judge Maya Sterling stepped outside her front door. She was wearing black joggers, a gray hoodie, and running shoes. She had applied sunscreen to her face. She had charged her phone. She was preparing for a 6-mile walk along the route she had been walking 3 times a week for the past 5 years. She knew every street, she knew every intersection, she knew the neighborhoods. She had never encountered a problem. She had never expected to encounter one on her own street, on her own morning, in front of her own home. At 7:16 a.m., Officer Raymond Foster turned onto her block. Officer Raymond Foster was 39 years old, 14 years on the police force, 12 of those years in this district. He had issued approximately 3,000 citations. He had made approximately 400 arrests. He had never been disciplined for misconduct. He had also never been investigated for patterns of bias in his stops, which suggested either that his bias was invisible to the department or that no one had been looking closely enough. He was a product of the district. His father had been police. His grandfather had been police. The badge was family. The assumptions embedded in the department were his assumptions. The patterns that went unquestioned were patterns he did not question. At 7:16 a.m., Officer Foster was conducting a morning patrol, routine procedure, rolling slowly through the neighborhood, checking for anything out of the ordinary, anything that disrupted the pattern, anything that did not fit his understanding of what belonged. He saw Judge Maya Sterling walking down the sidewalk in front of her own home. She was black. She was alone. She was walking in a neighborhood where not everyone lived. The capulation happened instantly in his mind. She did not fit. Therefore, she required explanation. He slowed his vehicle. He did not approach with urgency or caution. He approached with certainty, the certainty of someone who had never been questioned. He rolled to a stop directly beside her and exited his vehicle. The Bodycam activated as he stepped out. The image showed Judge Sterling from behind initially. She was walking at a steady pace. Her hands were at her sides. Her posture was upright. Her breathing was steady. She was not running. She was not moving furtively. She was not displaying any behavior that suggested criminal intent. She was simply walking. "Excuse me," Officer Foster called out. His voice was not aggressive. It was neutral on the surface, but there was authority embedded in it. Judge Sterling turned. She did not approach him. She stood and waited. Her hands remained visible. Her posture remained open. She had been trained in law, not in police procedures, but she understood how power dynamics worked. Officer Foster walked toward her. The Bodycam captured the approach. Less than a meter now. The distance was narrowing. Invasion of space. Standard tactic. The kind of thing officers did to establish dominance in an encounter. "There's been a report of a burglary in progress in this neighborhood," Officer Foster said. His words were official, framed as information, but they were actually an accusation. "I'm going to need to ask you some questions." "What address?" Judge Sterling asked. Her voice was calm, professional, the voice of someone used to courtrooms and precise language. "I'm asking the questions here," Officer Foster said. His response was immediate and defensive. He did not like being questioned. He did not like precision. "I live here," Judge Sterling said. She gestured to the brownstone behind her. "This address. If there's a burglary, it's not at my home. I just stepped out my front door 30 seconds ago." Officer Foster looked at the address on her home. He looked back at Judge Sterling. His expression did not change, but his calculation did. The disbelief was written across his face in invisible ink that the Bodycam would later make visible. "Where do you actually live?" he asked. The question was phrased to suggest she was lying. "I live there," Judge Sterling said. She pointed directly to her front door. The door was red. The house number was clearly visible. "That brownstone. That is my address. That is my home. I have lived here for 5 years." Officer Foster did not believe her. The disbelief was absolute. A black woman in a nice neighborhood, claiming to own the house, making excuses about just stepping out the door. None of it fit his narrative of how ownership looked. "Do you have proof?" he asked. The question was rhetorical. It was an accusation. It was him asking her to prove something that should never have been questioned. "I don't need to provide proof that I live in my own home," Judge Sterling said. Her voice remained calm, but something had shifted in her tone. It had become legal, precise, educational.
If you received a report of a burglary, you need to investigate the address where the burglary was reported. You need to have specific information about a specific location. You cannot stop every person you see on the street based on their presence in a neighborhood. "You're being evasive," Officer Foster said. His frustration was rising. She was not complying with the unspoken rule that when he asked questions, people answered them. When he asserted authority, people submitted to it. "I'm being factual," Judge Sterling said. "I live at this address. I've just stepped outside my door for my morning walk, and your stop has no legal basis. It violates the Fourth Amendment." Officer Foster stepped closer. The body cam recorded the invasion, the physical pressure being applied through proximity, through the narrowing of space, through the assertion that her personal boundary could be crossed. "You need to provide identification," Officer Foster said. His hand had moved toward his belt, toward his ticket book, toward his authority. "I don't," Judge Sterling said. "Not in my own neighborhood, not on the sidewalk in front of my own home, and not without a legal reason. You need to articulate reasonable suspicion based on specific, articulable facts. Being black in a neighborhood is not reasonable suspicion. Walking is not reasonable suspicion. Existing in public space is not reasonable suspicion." Officer Foster's jaw tightened. The body cam captured the micro-expression, the moment where he encountered resistance, the moment where someone was telling him no. "You're obstructing," Officer Foster said. His voice had risen slightly. "You're interfering with a police investigation." "There is no investigation at my address," Judge Sterling said. "You have not conducted any investigation. You have received a report of a burglary at an unknown address and have decided to stop me based on my appearance. That is not an investigation. That is racial profiling." Officer Foster did not know he was speaking to a federal judge. He did not know that every word he was speaking was being recorded on two cameras, his body cam and her doorbell camera. He knew only that he was being questioned about his authority. He knew only that someone was contradicting him, and that was intolerable to him.
"Put your hands where I can see them," Officer Foster said. His hand moved to his belt. His demeanor shifted from casual to controlled threat. "My hands are visible," Judge Sterling said. Her hands were at her sides. They had been visible the entire time. "They are exactly where you can see them." "I'm going to ask you one more time," Officer Foster said. "Put your hands where I can see them." Judge Sterling did not move. Her hands did not shift. Her posture did not change. She was exercising her right to refuse an illegal order. She was exercising the right she had spent her entire career defending. "This is your last warning," Officer Foster said. "You need to comply now." "I'm not complying with an illegal order," Judge Sterling said, "and you need to step back and cease this stop. You are violating my constitutional rights." Officer Foster did not step back. He stepped forward. His hand went to his radio. The body cam continued recording. The doorbell camera continued recording. Everything was being captured. Every word, every movement, every violation. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12, he said. His voice was official now. He was making it official. "I have a non-compliant individual at Oak and 19th Street. Possible suspect in the burglary report I mentioned. She's refusing to provide identification. She's being evasive about her presence in the neighborhood." The radio crackled. A voice from dispatch asked for clarification. "Female, black, mid-50s, Officer Foster said. He was reading her from the street to the entire dispatch center. He was making her a suspect in a dispatch record. He was creating official documentation of racial profiling. Possibly casing homes for future burglary, refusing to cooperate, non-compliant." The radio voice crackled back. "Copy that. Backup is en route to your location." Judge Sterling was standing on the sidewalk in front of her own home in broad daylight at 7:20 a.m., being described to the police department as a burglary suspect based solely on her presence on the street, based solely on her race. The body cam continued recording. The doorbell camera continued recording. Everything was being documented for posterity. "You're describing me to dispatch as a suspect," Judge Sterling said. "Based on what? I've done nothing. I'm standing on a public sidewalk in front of my own home. I have not moved. I have not acted suspiciously. The only thing that makes me a suspect in your mind is the color of my skin." "You're being detained," Officer Foster said. His hand went to his handcuffs. The metal was visible, shiny, official, a symbol of authority that he was about to deploy. "Detained for what?" Judge Sterling asked. "What is the legal basis for detention? The Fourth Amendment requires that detention be based on reasonable suspicion that a person has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a crime. What crime am I suspected of? What specific facts support that suspicion?" Officer Foster was not listening. He had moved past listening. He had moved past the point where legal argument mattered. He had moved into the space where authority was being asserted, regardless of legality, regardless of constitutionality, regardless of the fact that he was being recorded. "Turn around," Officer Foster said. His voice was lower now, controlled, the voice of someone exercising power. "No," Judge Sterling said. She did not move. Officer Foster moved forward and grabbed her arm. The body cam captured the moment precisely, the moment where a police officer's hands were placed on a woman who was doing nothing wrong, on her own street, in front of her own home, the moment where his fingers closed around her arm, the moment where force was applied. "You're assaulting me," Judge Sterling said. Her voice remained calm, but something had hardened in it. It was no longer educational. It was no longer explaining the law. It was stating fact. "You are violating my constitutional rights under color of law. I am documenting everything you're doing, everything you are saying, and I will be filing charges against you." Officer Foster did not release her. He turned her forcibly around. He pulled her hands behind her back. He applied handcuffs. The metal closed around her wrists with an audible click. 2 clicks, 1 for each wrist. The body cam recorded everything. The doorbell camera recorded everything. There was now irrevocable documentation of what had occurred. A neighbor emerged from a home across the street. Her name was Patricia Johnson. She had lived in the neighborhood for 7 years. She knew Judge Sterling. They had spoken at neighborhood association meetings. She knew who she was. Then another neighbor emerged, then another. People were now watching a woman being handcuffed on her own porch, while an officer stood over her with complete certainty. People were now witnessing the moment where power operated without accountability. "What's her crime?" Patricia Johnson called out. Her voice carried across the street. Officer Foster did not answer her. He was not accountable to neighbors. He did not need to explain himself to civilians. He was walking Judge Sterling to his vehicle. Her hands were cuffed behind her back. Her wrists were held. She was being placed in the back of a police car in full view of the neighborhood, in full view of witnesses, in full view of her home. The body cam was still recording.
Officer Foster had driven approximately 3 miles when Judge Sterling spoke. Her voice was still calm, still controlled, but it carried the weight of federal authority, the weight of 22 years defending constitutional law, the weight of authority earned through knowledge, not asserted through power. "My name is Judge Maya Sterling," she said. "I am a judge on the United States District Court for the Eastern District. I was appointed to the bench in 2012. I have been serving in that capacity for 12 years. I was arrested without probable cause. I was detained without reasonable suspicion. I was handcuffed in front of my neighbors while standing in front of my own home. I was transported in a police vehicle. Everything you did was recorded on my doorbell camera and your own body cam." Officer Foster's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The body cam was still recording. It had been recording the entire time. Every word he had spoken to dispatch, every movement he had made, every violation he had committed. "You're claiming to be a judge?" Officer Foster said. His voice had changed. It was smaller. It was no longer certain. "I'm not claiming," Judge Sterling said. "I am a judge. Federal District Court. Judge Maya Sterling. Badge number. Actually, judges don't have badge numbers, but my judicial identification number is 4782. I have been since 2012. I have overturned 43 convictions based on Fourth Amendment violations committed by officers like you, and I know exactly what you've done. I know exactly what you said. I know exactly how you violated my constitutional rights." Officer Foster did not speak. He was driving. He was calculating. He was understanding in real time that he had made a catastrophic error, an irreversible error, an error that was being recorded, an error that would be examined by federal prosecutors, an error that would be analyzed by judges, an error that would end his career. When they arrived at the police station at 8:12 a.m., the atmosphere changed immediately. Officer Foster was instructed by his supervisor to immediately remove the handcuffs. A supervisor had learned who was in the back of the vehicle, not through Officer Foster's explanation, through Judge Sterling's identification. The handcuffs were removed. Judge Sterling's wrists were examined. There were marks, bruises, evidence of the force that had been applied. The body cam captured the marks. The doorbell camera had captured the entire arrest from the moment it began. Judge Sterling was processed for her own arrest. The paperwork was filled out. The charges were listed: loitering, obstruction of an investigation, resisting arrest. The lies were documented in the police report. Officer Foster had written that Judge Sterling had been evasive, that she had resisted, that she had interfered with his investigation. Then a captain arrived. His name was Captain Michael Rodriguez. He had tried a case in Judge Sterling's courtroom 2 years earlier, a civil rights case where a police officer had been accused of assault. Judge Sterling had convicted the officer. Captain Rodriguez understood immediately that a federal judge had just been arrested by one of his officers, that a federal judge had just been processed as a criminal suspect, that a federal judge was sitting in a holding cell. He walked directly to the holding area and released her. "I apologize, Your Honor," Captain Rodriguez said. His voice was formal. His demeanor had changed completely. "An apology is not sufficient," Judge Sterling said. Her voice was still calm, still controlled, but there was ice in it now, ice and authority. "I will be filing a federal civil rights complaint with the Department of Justice. I will be filing with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and I will be retaining counsel regarding civil litigation against Officer Foster, this department, and the municipality." She walked out of the police station at 9:47 a.m. She had been in custody for 1 hour and 31 minutes. The body cam footage had captured all of it. The doorbell camera footage had captured the arrest. Everything was documented. By 11 a.m., the Department of Justice had been notified through official channels. By 1 p.m., the Federal Bureau of Investigation had been contacted. By 3 p.m., federal investigators were reviewing the body cam footage and the doorbell camera footage simultaneously. What they found was undeniable: an unlawful stop based on no articulated reasonable suspicion, an unlawful detention that had lasted nearly 2 hours, handcuffing without probable cause, a false arrest record, all of it recorded from multiple angles, all of it documented, all of it legally indefensible. Internal Affairs opened an investigation immediately. They did not conduct a careful, methodical review. They conducted an urgent investigation that lasted 3 days. By the 3rd day, the findings were complete and undeniable. An unlawful stop, an unlawful detention, unlawful handcuffing, false arrest, all violations of constitutional law, all violations of department policy, all violations of basic decency.
By day 5, Officer Raymond Foster was terminated, not suspended pending investigation, not placed on administrative leave, terminated. His badge was removed from his person, his credentials were revoked, his access to the station was rescinded, his employment record was marked with cause. The Department of Justice filed federal charges: false imprisonment under color of law, deprivation of rights under color of law, civil rights violations. Each charge carried potential sentences of up to 15 years. The charges were filed in federal court. They were prosecution by the highest authority in the land. Judge Maya Sterling retained counsel. She selected one of the most prominent civil rights attorneys in the nation. Civil rights litigation was filed against Officer Raymond Foster individually, against the police department, and against the municipality as the entity responsible for his actions. The case was not complex in its legal components. The evidence was undisputable. The Bodycam had captured everything. The doorbell camera had captured everything. Video evidence from 2 independent sources corroborated the violations. The police report had documented lies. The dispatch recording had captured the moment when Judge Sterling was described as a burglary suspect to the entire department. The discovery phase revealed additional information that changed everything. Officer Foster's history was examined: 118 traffic stops and pedestrian stops over 4 years. 89 of those stops involved people of color. 63 of those stops had resulted in citations or arrests. Of those arrests, 29 had been for crimes that had been impossible to prove in court. Charges had been dropped. Cases had been dismissed. Innocent people had been arrested by Officer Foster based on his profiling.
Where are you headed?
Walking. Is there a problem?
You don't live around here.
I didn't know walking required residency.
People don't just wander this neighborhood. Let me see some ID.
Before you go any further, you just profiled a federal agent. Your camera caught all of it.
At 6:42 a.m., in a gated suburban neighborhood where silence is treated like ownership, a patrol officer spots something he decides doesn't belong. A black woman, walking, alone. No call for service, no report, no crime. But the body cam captures the moment his posture changes. Shoulders tense, voice sharp, assumptions already locked in. He asks where she's going, why she's here, who she knows. She doesn't raise her voice, doesn't argue, doesn't explain herself, because for the last 18 years she's been trained never to volunteer information to someone abusing authority. What the officer doesn't know, what he never bothers to ask, is that the woman he's cornering has spent her entire adult life hunting foreign intelligence operatives, enforcing federal law, and dismantling threats most officers will never see. And in the next 24 minutes, his own camera will prove that the only person acting suspicious was him. The neighborhood was Cherry Hill. Manicured lawns, estate homes, security gates at every entrance. The kind of place where people expected to see the same faces, the same patterns, the same order every single day. At 6:42 a.m., the streets were empty. The sun was just breaking the horizon. The silence was absolute. Officer David Reinhardt was 41 years old, 17 years on the police force, 9 of those years in this district where crime statistics were low and complaints from residents centered on nuance, parking permits, yard maintenance, unfamiliar vehicles on streets where every car was registered and accounted for. He was doing a morning patrol, standard procedure, rolling slowly through the neighborhood, checking for anything out of the ordinary, anything that disrupted the pattern. He saw her on Crescent Drive, a black woman, alone, walking at a steady pace, hands at her sides, posture upright, moving with purpose but not urgency. She was wearing dark joggers, a gray hoodie, and athletic shoes. She was not dressed for the neighborhood. She was not moving like someone who lived there. She was moving like someone who was passing through. Officer Reinhardt slowed his vehicle. He did not approach slowly or cautiously. He approached with certainty. He rolled to a stop directly beside her and exited his patrol car. The body cam activated as he stepped out. The image showed the woman from less than a meter away. Her face was calm, her breathing was steady. She was not startled, she was not defensive, she was simply a woman walking on a public street being interrupted by a police officer. "Good morning," the woman said. She spoke first. She smiled slightly. She was not waiting to be accused. Officer Reinhardt did not return the greeting. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "I'm out for a walk, morning exercise before work." "You don't live around here," Officer Reinhardt said. It was not a question. "No," the woman said. "I'm just passing through." "This neighborhood doesn't get foot traffic," Officer Reinhardt said. His tone had shifted. The casual question had become an accusation. "People drive, they don't walk." "I like to walk different routes. It's good exercise." Officer Reinhardt stepped closer. The Bodycam captured the invasion of space, the physical pressure being applied through proximity. "Can I see your ID?" Officer Reinhardt asked. "Am I being detained?" the woman asked. "I'm asking you a question. That's a routine request." "It's not routine if I'm not suspected of a crime, and you haven't articulated any suspicion. You've just made observations about where I am." Officer Reinhardt's jaw tightened. The Bodycam captured the micro-expression, the moment where he encountered resistance. "This is a private neighborhood," Officer Reinhardt said. "I have the authority to ask residents for identification. It's routine." "I'm not a resident, and I'm on a public sidewalk. The Fourth Amendment applies here." Officer Reinhardt was silent for a moment. The Bodycam recorded the pause, the moment where he was recalibrating his approach. "Step to the side." His hand had moved toward his belt, not toward his weapon, toward his notebook. The woman stepped to the side as requested. She kept her hands visible.
Officer Reinhardt was writing something in his notebook. The Bodycam couldn't capture what he was writing, but his posture suggested he was documenting the encounter. "How long have you been walking in this neighborhood?" he asked. "This is my first time," the woman said. "I was exploring different routes." "At 6:42 in the morning?" Officer Reinhardt said. "In a neighborhood where you don't live?" "Yes," the woman said. "You could be casing houses," Officer Reinhardt said, "looking for homes to burglarize." "I'm not," the woman said. "I'm walking." "How do I know that?" Officer Reinhardt asked. "You don't," the woman said, "but suspicion isn't the same as probable cause, and looking like I don't fit the neighborhood isn't the same as suspicion." Officer Reinhardt's face reddened, not from embarrassment, from anger, from the resistance of someone who had never been questioned about the legal basis for his authority. "You know what?" he said. His voice had risen. "I think you're loitering. I think you're loitering with the intent to commit a crime. That's illegal." "I'm not loitering. I'm walking. Those are two different things." "You're obstructing a police investigation," Officer Reinhardt said. "There is no investigation," the woman said. "You stopped me without cause, and now you're trying to justify it retroactively." The Bodycam captured the escalation. The woman's hands remained visible. Her breathing remained steady. Her voice remained controlled. Everything about her posture suggested someone trained in how to interact with law enforcement, someone who understood the law, someone who knew her rights. Officer Reinhardt stepped closer again. "I want your ID," he said, "right now, or I'm going to assume you're lying about your identity and detain you while I verify who you are." "You can't detain me without reasonable suspicion," the woman said, "and you don't have it." Officer Reinhardt's hand moved to his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7, he said. "I have a suspicious person at Crescent Drive. Female, black, refusing to provide identification, possibly loitering with intent to commit a crime." The woman closed her eyes for a moment, just for a moment, but the Bodycam captured it. The moment of resignation. The moment where she understood that the law she had spent her entire adult life defending was about to be violated in her presence. "I'm FBI, she said. Her voice was still calm, still controlled, but something had shifted. Something had hardened. "My name is Agent Victoria Barnes. I'm on active duty, and you need to step away from me right now." Officer Reinhardt stared at her. "That's convenient. You're claiming to be FBI now? I'm not claiming, I'm telling you, and I'm going to show you my credentials. I'm going to reach into my jacket slowly. I want you to see my hands the entire time." Agent Victoria Barnes slowly opened her jacket. The body cam captured the movement. Her hand reached into the jacket. Her fingers found the credential holder. Her hand emerged. The badge was gold, federal. The seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation was visible, unmistakable. Agent Barnes opened the holder fully and held it where Officer Reinhardt could read it clearly. "Amara Nicole Johnson," she said, "Special Agent, badge number 78451, Counterintelligence Division. I've been with the FBI for 18 years. I'm currently assigned to a secure operation in this region, and you have just committed an unlawful stop and illegal detention based solely on my race." Officer Reinhardt's face had gone pale. "It's federal." The seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation was visible, unmistakable. Agent Barnes opened the holder fully and held it where Officer Reinhardt could read it clearly. "Amara Nicole Johnson," she said, "Special Agent, badge number 78451, Counterintelligence Division. I've been with the FBI for 18 years. I'm currently assigned to a secure operation in this region, and you have just committed an unlawful stop and illegal detention based solely on my race." Officer Reinhardt's radio crackled. Dispatch was asking for clarification on his last transmission. "Unit 7, please advise on the status of the suspicious person," dispatch said. Officer Reinhardt did not respond. He was looking at the badge. He was looking at the woman. He was looking at his body cam. The realization was moving across his face in stages. "I didn't know," Officer Reinhardt said. "I was just doing my job." "Your job is to enforce the law, not to violate it. And you've violated the 4th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and federal law by detaining me without cause." Officer Reinhardt's hand was shaking slightly. The body cam captured it. "I'll just let you go. No harm done." "Harm has been done," Agent Barnes said. "You've compromised an active federal operation. You've documented federal activity that should not be documented, and you've created evidence of racial profiling and civil rights violations." She pulled out her own phone. She dialed a number. The call connected immediately. "This is Agent Amara Johnson, Counterintelligence Division, badge 78451. I've been stopped and detained unlawfully by a local patrol officer. Crescent Drive, Cherry Hill. Officer David Reinhardt, badge number 9847. The operation is compromised. I'm at the scene. I need immediate support." She paused. She listened. Her face remained composed. "Understood," she said. "I'm activating the secure recording. All documentation begins now." She ended the call. She looked at Officer Reinhardt. "You need to step away from me, and you need to remain at this location until my supervisor arrives." Officer Reinhardt stepped back. The body cam captured the retreat, the moment where his authority had been inverted, the moment where the suspect had become the authority.
17 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up to Crescent Drive. 2 FBI agents exited the vehicle. They were wearing suits. They were wearing credentials. They approached Officer Reinhardt with the precision of people who had conducted hundreds of official interviews. One of the agents identified himself as Special Agent Michael Torres, Supervisor, Counterintelligence Division. "Officer Reinhardt," Agent Torres said. It was not a greeting. It was a statement of identification. "You've detained a federal agent without legal basis. You've photographed federal credentials on your body cam. You've documented an active federal operation. Do you understand what you've done?" Officer Reinhardt did not answer. "I'm going to need your body cam," Agent Torres said. I'm going to need you to step away from Agent Barnes, and I'm going to need you to remain here while we determine the extent of the operational damage." Officer Reinhardt removed his Bodycam and handed it to Agent Torres. His hands were steady now, but his face was no longer pale. It was ashen. Agent Torres took the Bodycam. He examined it. He nodded to his partner, who was now speaking into a radio in low, urgent tones. "The operation site is exposed," the second agent said into the radio. "All personnel are to withdraw. Facility C is compromised. Relay immediately." The transmission was complete. The operation had been shut down. The surveillance had been terminated. Months of federal work, intelligence gathering, pattern analysis, security assessment had been undone by a single unlawful stop. A patrol supervisor arrived, then a captain, then a sergeant from Internal Affairs. Agent Torres explained what had occurred. He explained the legal violations. He explained the operational consequences. He explained that this was now a federal matter and that Officer Reinhardt's continued presence at the scene was not optional. Officer Reinhardt was escorted to his patrol vehicle. He was told to report to his station immediately and to speak to no one about what had occurred. He was told that the Bodycam footage would be seized as evidence. By 7:15 a.m., Officer David Reinhardt's routine morning patrol had become a federal investigation. Internal Affairs opened a file before Officer Reinhardt arrived at the station. The contents were clear: unlawful stop, unlawful detention, racial profiling, and obstruction of a federal operation. The investigation took 3 days. By day 3, the findings were devastating. The stop had no legal basis. The detention was unconstitutional. The officer's actions were driven by racial profiling. The Bodycam footage showed all of it. By day 5, Officer Reinhardt was terminated. Not suspended, terminated. His badge was revoked. His certification was suspended pending revocation. His employment was terminated for cause. The federal government filed charges: false imprisonment under color of law, civil rights violation, obstruction of federal operations. Each charge carried potential sentences of up to 15 years. Agent Amara Johnson filed a civil rights lawsuit against Officer Reinhardt, the police department, and the municipality. The case was not complex. The evidence was not disputed. The Bodycam had recorded everything. The discovery phase revealed additional information. Officer Reinhardt's history was examined. 73 pedestrian stops over 4 years. 58 of those stops involved people of color. Of those stops, 42 had resulted in citations or arrests. Of those arrests, all but 5 had been for minor violations or no violation at all. The pattern was clear. The targeting was systematic. The bias was documented. Cases were reviewed. 3 individuals who had been arrested by Officer Reinhardt were released. Their convictions were overturned. They had spent a combined total of 6 years in prison for minor offenses that had been manufactured by racial profiling. The city's insurance carrier calculated the exposure. The settlement was inevitable. By month 7, the settlement had been negotiated: $6 million. The city would admit no wrongdoing, but would pay the settlement. The announcement was made at a federal courthouse. Federal prosecutors stood beside Agent Johnson. They explained the case. They explained how racial profiling had triggered unlawful detention. They explained how one officer's bias had cost a city $6 million. They did not explain how many other stops had not been recorded, how many other people had been detained without cause, how many had not been federal agents with the resources to prosecute back.
Officer Reinhardt went to trial for the federal charges. The Bodycam footage was presented. The testimony was presented. The documents were presented. The jury heard the questions he had asked. They heard the logic he had used. They heard his explanation, which essentially was that the presence of a black woman in the neighborhood was itself suspicious. The jury found him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. His appeal was filed and denied. His pension was forfeited. He entered federal prison with no retirement, no health insurance, no professional future. His conviction made regional news. His case was used in police academies as an example of what happens when bias transforms a routine patrol into a federal violation. The police department was placed under federal scrutiny. All pedestrian stops would be reviewed. All body cams would remain active. Any patterns of racial targeting would result in immediate investigation. Agent Victoria Barnes returned to duty. She was commended for her restraint. She was promoted to senior supervising agent overseeing racial bias investigations in law enforcement. She did not speak about her own case publicly. She simply continued working, understanding that her badge had protected her in a way that the Constitution alone could not have. She had spent 18 years protecting the nation from foreign threats. She had sworn oaths to defend the Constitution. She had followed procedures more strictly than most officers ever would. And on the morning of her encounter with Officer Reinhardt, she had been stopped, questioned, and threatened with detention based solely on the color of her skin. The body cam footage became teaching material. It was shown in law enforcement training across multiple states. It was titled Racial Profiling and Constitutional Violation, a Case Study. The video showed what bias looks like when recorded. It showed how quickly authority can collapse when challenged with law and documentation. It showed how restraint and calm can dismantle accusation. The question that remained unasked in the aftermath was simple. How many pedestrian stops had Officer Reinhardt conducted where no body cam was present? How many women had been detained based on similar suspicions? How many had not been federal agents with the resources and authority to fight back? How many were still in prison based on charges that had been manufactured through racial profiling? The body cam showed one incident. The pattern suggested there were many more. But without the footage, without the federal investigation, without Agent Barnes' position in law enforcement, those other stops would have remained invisible. They would have remained crimes without consequence. The quiet street at 6:42 a.m. returned to normal. The neighborhood returned to its patterns. The gates remained closed. The silence remained treated like ownership. But the system that had allowed Officer Reinhardt to operate without consequence had been exposed. Agent Victoria Barnes walks occasionally, early mornings before work, exploring different routes, maintaining her fitness. She has never returned to Crescent Drive. She has never needed to. The point had been made. Officer Reinhardt is currently serving his sentence at a federal correctional institution in Pennsylvania. He will be eligible for release in 2029. His law enforcement career is over. His reputation is destroyed. His certainty about his own authority has been replaced with the knowledge that the woman he stopped, questioned, and threatened with detention was better trained in the law than he ever was. This wasn't about walking while black. It was about mistaking discipline for weakness. It was about underestimating a woman who has spent her entire adult life enforcing the law better than the man who stopped her. It was about the assumption that a badge grants the authority to violate the Constitution. It was about the discovery that some people, the ones with federal credentials, the ones with the power to prosecute back, cannot be violated with impunity. And it cost Officer Reinhardt $6 million in civil damages, 4 years in federal prison, a forfeited pension, and a destroyed career. All because he decided that a black woman didn't belong on a quiet street at 6:42 in the morning. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. And if this story showed you something you didn't know before, hit subscribe. Because these stories only have power when people actually see them.